Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Data Bites number 2, Getting Things Done with Data in Government, kindly supported by RHE Global. I'm Gavin Freegard, Programme Director here at the Institute for Government, where I'm responsible for our work on data and digital government, and I hope you're all having a better day than Gavin Williamson, who's just been sacked, for those of you who hadn't heard. How many of you came to our first Data Bites event out of interest? Put your hands up. Excellent, that's really reassuring. Welcome back. Those of you who've not been to a Data Bites event before, put your hands up. Welcome. I very much hope you enjoy it, and I'll talk you through the sort of format and how it's all going to work shortly. A bit of housekeeping before we get started properly. We are on the record tonight. We're being live streamed, so hello to anybody watching us from elsewhere. I know we had a big audience in Cardiff last time, and I think we've got some people in Newcastle tonight, so particular shout out to you. The hashtag, if you'd like to join in on Twitter, is hashtag IFGDataBytes, and you can also follow at IFG Events. And for those of you in the room, here are the Wi-Fi details. Network's IFG guest, the username is IFG, and the password is visitor. So shortly, I will tell you how the format works for those of you who've not been before. I'll introduce this evening's fantastic lineup of speakers, but also just want to talk to you a little bit quickly about the IFG and what we do with data. Hopefully some of you have come across some of our previous work. We spend a lot of time visualising and analysing data about government in Whitehall Monitor, about public services and performance tracker, about Parliament in Parliamentary Monitor, and we've also done lots of data-driven things on government procurement, and most recently the effect of Brexit on Whitehall as well. We've also made various recommendations about things that government should publish that it doesn't at the moment. Now, at the last one of these, I showed one of our charts about ministerial resignations, and I very smugly included this one today, and I was going to say, well, actually, we've only had one since the last one. We had 2 on the day of the event last time round. And, you know, we're going to have to update this in real time at some point. And in fact, the most significant thing, so this one shows you all of the resignations outside of reshuffles. There is a version where it's only people who've resigned over political or policy differences. And the most significant thing that happened with that chart between the last event and this one was somebody decided to stitch it. Heidi Mitchell on Twitter, which is rather wonderful. Hello, thank you very much. I have to say, we absolutely loved it. We were literally in stitches. Sorry. You're going to enjoy the rest of the evening, I can tell. Threading seamlessly from data stitchification to some more data visualisation, something that we've done recently that I just want to tell you about. We've been involved with the Blavatnik School of Government at Oxford, and supported by the UK Civil Service on INSIDES, which is the International Civil Service Effectiveness Index. If you go to bsg.ox.ac.uk/insides, you can delve into much more detail, play with the interactive charts. But we've also got something coming up in the next few days that I wanted to tell you about. My brilliant colleagues Aaron, Akash and Lucy have been working on a special report looking at 20 years of devolution. It's called Devolution at 20. Here is a sneak preview. It shows you sort of where legislation's been passed about the various nations of the UK. And you can sort of see the stories of Scotland, sort of after 1999, passing its own legislation. Wales, it took a bit longer, and Northern Ireland, we've sort of gone back to Westminster. So it's amazing the stories that a chart like that can show you. Again, we will have more on that in the next few days. This will be published at the end of the week. Next Tuesday, there's a launch event, and we've actually got Mark Drakeford, the First Minister of Wales, speaking here next week as well. So do go to our website and sign up for those. And it's funny, there's a bit of a Welsh theme tonight inadvertently, because Aaron, who's leading this work, is Welsh. I'm Welsh. RHE Global, our sponsors tonight, are Welsh. And there's a really important piece of Home Nations data visualisation that we were hoping to include at Devolution at 20, but we couldn't quite fit it in. And it's the Men's Six Nations final table. You can see Wales at the top there. We've also got a version which shows you how far ahead of everybody else we were. I could go on. How to alienate 95% of your audience in 3 slides. But we don't just analyse data at the Institute, we're also concerned with supporting government to do a lot more, to use it more effectively, which I think is one of the biggest challenges of government in the modern age. And that's one of the reasons why we're holding these Data Bites events, to bring together people working on very different types of data across government, to show people who don't work on data and digital what better data actually means, and to put best practice and interesting projects on the record, which is what we're going to be doing tonight, as we did last time out. So how does this event work, hopefully? It's not a typical IFG event. You're going to be seeing 4 presentations on data projects. Each speaker will have 8 minutes to present. 8 minutes. You will see there is a clock on stage there. Why 8 minutes? Well, I went into a very good explanation of why last time, and my colleague who was manning the IFG events Twitter account clearly didn't agree and just said, why 8 minutes? It's a long story. Obviously, bytes are the key sort of unit of information. There are 8 bits in a byte. There are 8 minutes in a data byte. We love jokes like that here at the Institute for Government. So each speaker will have 8 minutes to present. That will then be followed by 8 minutes of Q&A, so questions from you in the audience. Again, I will start the clock ticking as soon as the first questioner starts asking the first question. Remember, you will be on the record. Give us your name and where you're from. Keep your questions short. And yes, we'll sort of keep it moving quite briskly from there. Once we've had the 8 minutes of presentation and the 8 minutes of questions, we will then move on to the next speaker. We'll get through 4 presentations. Please do join us on the landing afterwards for drinks and nibbles. If you'd like to learn more about our last event, where we had the ONS talking about real-time economic data, we had MHCLG, Mahoka logo, I'm determined to make that stick, talking about better data infrastructure and housing. We had Vocalink talking about detecting financial fraud, and we had Ofgem talking about how they do data internally. You can go to that link there. But now for tonight's lineup, we've got a fantastic sort of smorgasbord of data projects for you tonight. First, we'll be hearing from Aleks Bobrowska from the Department for Work and Pensions, talking about skills demand data as a digital service. I spoke to one of Alex's colleagues about this project a few weeks ago. It's so interesting, we could have filled all 4 slots with it, so very much looking forward to that, and no pressure. We'll then be hearing from Sarah Gates and Sam Roberts about the data ethics framework. Then Simon Worthington will be talking about personal data in government and why it's completely broken. And then we'll be hearing from our sponsors tonight, RHE Global, talking about their noise app, Martin Pilkington and Hugh Williams, so from Ceredigion. So again, that Welsh theme is inadvertently strong tonight. A date for your diaries, 4th of June will be the next IFG Data Bytes event. We've got a brilliant lineup of speakers already, actually, but if you would be interested in pitching a presentation, come and grab me or email me afterwards. We are looking for sponsors to keep this series running, and what better audience and what better subject than the future of government in the 21st century. If you are interested in supporting future events, please do drop david.trepepi-lewis@instituteforgovernment.org.uk a line, and can I speak slowly for 10 seconds to hit the 0 exactly on point? I'm not sure I can. But thank you very much for joining us this evening, and without further ado, I will introduce Aleks. Technology. Endearing, I think, is the word.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Aleks Bobrowska. I work for DWP Digital, where we have designed a digital service bringing skills demand data to local government. Now, why have we done this? The need for this service arises from the fact that local government need to understand which skills and job titles are in demand and how digital they are in their local area in order to make informed decisions about training. This training needs to give people the right skills to fill local jobs, both the ones that exist right now, but also the jobs that will exist in the future. And they also need to provide people with enough digital skills to allow them to participate in the increasingly digital economy. Now, although this is a local issue, there's a number of central government departments looking to tackle it. One of them is DCMS. They've got their local digital skills partnerships, which help deliver targeted digital skills training. And at DWP, we've got our labor market strategy, where we recognize that with appropriate training, we can help more people into work and we can help more people progress into better employment. So we collaborated with DCMS to create a digital information service for local government. We started off with a discovery, so we looked at what is possible to do with the data that we have. We purchased a dataset from a job aggregation website called Zuna, and that dataset contains over 65 million job ads posted over the last 4 years. That contains over 6,000 unique skills, 5,000 unique job titles. Being a team of data scientists, we looked at what cool stuff we can do with the data. We came up with clustering, entropy, outlier detection, recommendation engine, just to name a few. On the other side of the coin, we looked at what our users actually require. So we identified our users as local enterprise partnerships, or LEPs, and local authorities, because these are the institutions which shape local economy by influencing employers and training providers to put on the right training to give people the right skills. And they can do that by providing them with evidence from an information service. So we asked them how they've been influencing their stakeholders so far. We discovered that technical ability varies not only between LEP and lab, but also on an individual level within LEP. And also data use is very inconsistent between institutions. And so we've seen examples of using just open data, as well as commissioning third-party research, as well as sending out their own surveys to employers, which can be flawed when the surveys are only sent out to the major employers, and so SMEs get missed out. In the overlap between what is possible and what is required, we placed our design. And so we've designed a place-based application where all the insights and analytics are tailored to the user's chosen place. Due to the varied technical ability, we decided to put the analytics behind the scenes. So for example, boiling down 6,000 skills to 20 categories via a clustering algorithm appears to the user in the form of a drop-down box. And we're also showcasing insights. So right away, we're giving users information about what's interesting and unique about their chosen area, while also giving them the opportunity to explore the data themselves. While we were busy building the data prototype, our user researchers kept gathering feedback and iterating design with the users. That allowed us to determine which information is useful and cut out all the unnecessary clutter. It also allowed us to discover that they would like to see some additional context, such as, for example, economic activity rates data. And it allowed us to iterate some of our visuals to make sure that they are fit for purpose. So now I will try to show you a live demo of the application. There we go. Just to let you know, this is an alpha prototype, which means that we can scrap everything in this application if the user feedback suggests that we should. And also, this is a proof of concept, which means that we've been designing things to show that it's possible rather than to show that this is the best way to do it. So after you've read the blurb about what the service does, we're asked to supply a place that we're interested in. So we're going to go for the Northeast Lab, because that's where I live. There we go. Right away, we're giving an interesting fact. So this is, again, behind this sits outlier detection, and this is giving our user immediately a kind of interesting insight. So customer service advisor roles have fallen compared to on last year compared to other labs. So as a lab user, I can think if I've got training in this area, I might want to dial it down because the skill is falling in demand. If we scroll down, oh, this is very fast. There we go. If we scroll down, we see the five skills that are in most demand in the Northeast Lab, and also the 5 skills that have grown the most over the last year. So again, this is immediately giving our users 5 or 10 areas that they can be focusing on when deciding where to put on training. As I said, when we click through, we give the users an opportunity to explore the data themselves. So this is a very large table that contains every single skill that appeared on a job ad in the Northeast over the last month. So the drop-down that I was talking about here, there's 20 categories. Powerful clustering algorithm sits behind this, but the user doesn't have to see that. They're not bombarded with that information. On the other hand here, what we've done as well is to every skill we've assigned a level of digitensity, which is a word that I made up for it. Again, this is a drop-down box, but in reality what we're doing is we're matching the skills to Wikipedia and analyzing the text in Wikipedia articles to determine how digital the skill is. So if we look at highly digital skills, live demos never work. There we go. So if you look at highly digital skills, as a lab user, I can see right away that this skill, advertising, is highly digital, which is something that might be surprising to people, which means that if I'm thinking about putting on training in advertising, I might want to pair it with some digital training as well to give people a more well-rounded set of skills if they're thinking about that career. If I'm trying to convince my stakeholders to put on that training in the Northeast, I'll need some more evidence. And so this page gives us a tailored view of evidence behind advertising in the Northeast, so very kind of specialized. We see that the band is high. We see exactly how many vacancies appeared last month. We've got the salary range and transferability. So again, we're giving people words, but behind this is a number, which is the entropy of that skill. We've got a time series, so we can show our stakeholders exactly what's been happening to the demand for that skill over time, and we can compare it to the national average, which is the gray line over here. And we've also got a chart that shows us how the demand distributes over component local authorities in our lab. So if we're trying to decide where exactly in our area we should put that training, we can see that Newcastle upon Tyne has got the highest demand, so it's probably there that we should be providing that training. Down at the bottom, we've got something that came out of our recommendation engine work. So we've got 5 jobs that require this skill and 5 related skills. So again, this is something that can help our users explore the kind of skills landscape in this kind of subject area if they want to pair some training together. So these are just some features of our prototype. Now just in terms of next steps, we are gathering feedback and we are iterating with our users. So this includes fixing bugs, because obviously there's going to be bugs, but also putting in new features and putting in additional data that they request. In terms of a more strategic view, it turns out it's not just DCMS and DWP that care about giving people the right skills for the jobs that exist and will exist. DFE are also looking at that for their skills advisory panels policy. And so we are now talking about taking this project forward as a collaboration of 3 departments to build a single application that aligns to all of these policies and fulfills all of the user needs. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions and breathing a little bit.
Thank you very much indeed, Alex. Got us off to the best possible start. Once I have set that to go, who would like to ask questions? I'm going to take them in sort of groups of 3. Again, tell us who you are, where you're from. Keep it relatively short because it's your time and everybody else's that you'll be wasting. So I've got a question down here, a question there as well, and we've got one in the front. So if we go here, there, and there. Thank you. If you're in the room next door, by the way, and you'd like to ask a question, please come to the door during the next round.
Hi, I'm Emma from Snook. I wanted to ask a cheeky 2-part question. Firstly, I think I understand that the service is designed for people in local authorities and training providers to use. Is that right?
It's for local enterprise partnerships and local authorities to influence the training providers.
Right. My question is, I wondered if you'd thought about it as a service for end users, and if you've explored that at all. And then I also wondered how you decided what interesting facts to show people. Like, how did you design that content?
Brilliant, thank you. Go to the gentleman there.
James Kidner from Improbable. Congratulations, fascinating story and elegantly presented. Can you give, this is a rather prosaic question, but can you give us some sense of how long it's taken you to develop this, how many people involved, and roughly what it cost?
Thank you, and a question down here as well.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for that. John Corrible, BI Manager, Oxfordshire County Council. We have got some experience of using data around vacancy adverts to track shortages. How did you deal with 2 particular problems, one of which is potentially exaggerating skill shortages because the harder it is to recruit to a job, the more outlets you advertise it through, and the second of which is exaggerating the prevalence of jobs which are high turnover because they get advertised more often, but there aren't actually more people doing them.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so the first question was about designing for our end users. So everything we've been doing is essentially just for our end users. So if we had designed this application as just a team of data scientists, it would have looked a lot different. It would have been a lot of fancy charts and a lot of clicking through and a lot of kind of analytics and stuff. But our users didn't want that. That's why we had on board an interaction designer and a really brilliant user researcher. And they were both a really brilliant team that kind of allowed us to really shape the application based on what the users actually need. And we were cutting out things that, even though we thought were really cool, the users didn't find useful, so there's no place for them in our application.
Sorry, I think you misunderstood my question. I meant like the common person on the street to use it. So I imagined a use case of like, if I'm wanting to move out of London and I want to understand like where my job is available to do, I just wondered if we explored other use cases.
Yes, so we have thought about this, but because this is just an alpha stage at the moment, we want to focus at this particular purpose and prove this concept. And if we prove this concept that this works with local authorities and labs, then we can take this forward and we can use it in a variety of different ways. So we're also currently looking at using it internally within the department with some kind of internal data. So it's a very reusable framework, but for now we're just focusing. We want to deliver this thing in the best possible way for now. And your second question was about the interesting facts. So it's just outlier detection, essentially. It's just looking at how your lab compares to other labs in the region or in the country, or how your local authority compares to other local authorities in the country, and kind of normalizing it. So, for example, management is a skill that's high in demand everywhere because it's, just appears on every single job ad, essentially. But that wouldn't be an interesting fact. So only if something is higher than in other places, that's when we report it as an interesting fact. Again, it's not a very sophisticated methodology that we're using at the moment, just because it is a proof of concept. The second question was about how long and how many people. So we've got a multidisciplinary team with about 4 or 5 data scientists, but we've got other people there as well. We've got user researcher, content designer, interaction designer, product owner, agile delivery manager, and kind of bits and bobs of other roles as well. We started working on the data discovery last year, so around summer last year, I think. And then kind of started our actual delivery part in January. So we took about 3 months to actually build the thing. I can't tell you how much it costs, unfortunately, but yeah, this is how long it took. In terms of explaining some of the quirks with the data, as part of our data discovery, we did explore it quite intensively and quite vastly, so we are aware of various different caveats around this. Some of it is something that we can't help because it's the nature of the job. So, for example, bias against jobs with a high turnover being re-advertised. This is something that we're aware of, and the only thing that we can do about this for now is just let our users know that this might happen. And I think just by being honest about things that we're aware of, we can kind of plug that gap. But again, because this is a prototype, we kind of prove the concept, but we are working on kind of, if there's any additional caveats that maybe we can work around and we can fix in the data, then we will iterate on it in the next phases of the project.
Brilliant. Let's take another set of questions. Anybody next door, please come to the door. We'll go there, and there.
Hi, I'm Ed Parks. I work with public sector organisations on data strategy and innovation projects. I have a question about the extent to which past skills are a predictor of skills needed in the future, particularly in the context of digital skills, which change quite quickly. How confident are you that the information you're providing to the LEPs is a good guide for their sort of procuring behaviour?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Front row there.
Yeah, my question was nearly identical. You've got 4 years of data, but how are you using that to predict how vacancies are going to change in the future? That was it.
Thanks. And then the back row of that section there.
Yeah, my question is a bit similar as well. The Office of National Statistics have their own set of skills and jobs, list of types of roles, and I wonder whether you've been talking to them about perhaps bringing their list more up to date using the data that you're using.
Thank you.
So I'll just take the prediction question altogether. We're not actually predicting anything. There's no forecasting being done in the application. So we're basically supplying the users with the information at kind of face value. So we're saying these skills have been growing, and we can give them a percentage growth if this is what they require. But we're not saying that this means that they will be growing or that they will be in demand. By giving them that time series chart, we can kind of start showing them whether they're growing because, for example, in Blackpool, you would imagine retail and hospitality jobs growing over the summer, but then dipping after the summer. So we can kind of start showing that through the time series chart, but we're not actually making any predictions. So it's not a decision-making tool; it's a decision-supporting tool. So it's still in the remit of our users to decide what that information means for them and how they're going to base their decisions on that. Now, in terms of ONS datasets and kind of other work going on in this space, we are aware of stuff, and we would love to work with other organizations on updating like skills registers and skills taxonomies and things like that. So I think the only thing that I would say in here is please come and collaborate with us if you have work going on in this space, and watch this space if you're interested, I guess.
I like the idea of the ONS having a very particular set of skills. It's a bit Liam Neeson, isn't it? We've got time for one very quick further question. If anybody has a burning thing they would like to ask. Otherwise, Alex, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next up, we have Sam and Sarah talking about the Government Data Ethics Framework.
Okay, go. We were going to do an intro, but this is Sarah, I'm Sam. Let's just get on with it. So, straight away. So, we're here to talk about the data ethics framework. So, just a quick bit of context setting. So, in 2013, a series of sessions focusing on emerging technology and future skills led to the creation of the first government data science team, a joint venture between Cabinet Office and GDS, to explore the potential impact of data science on policy making and public service delivery. It became apparent quite quickly that government was not necessarily the most mature customer for this type of work. And so kind of as a result of some kind of slightly strange request, we decided that actually we needed to start thinking about things in a kind of a guidelines and what kind of things we needed to do in order to make government a more mature customer for data science. So the data science team actually went from strength to strength from 2013 to 2016, and in 2016 started to become a partnership. So the data science partnership was founded between ONS, GDS and Government Office for Science, and they commissioned a piece of public dialogue which is from Ipsos Mori and others, which actually kind of arrived at this point that although the public were kind of wary about some uses of data, they were quite happy as long as things were being done in a way that was transparent and well managed. So this kind of gave us an idea that actually we should go and publish what we think are the right things. This slide around the law and ethics is quite important. So on one side of the slides here, you see that the plethora of laws are actually quite difficult for non-experts to negotiate. We needed to quickly translate kind of lengthy legal documents into practical advice. And practical data ethics is essential in order to do things in the right way with government and with data, and also kind of helps us to try and find a process for setting up ways of making decisions and communicating benefits and risks to our stakeholders as well. So this all led to the actual creation of our first data science ethical framework. So this is from 2016. This is our first iteration, and this is our kind of beta version. And what this did was effectively kind of gave high-level guidance, things to consider when using data in terms of data science projects, and was tested with departments, and feedback was collected on its use.
So the original framework was published in 2016, and we kind of sat around for a year and people used it, and then we kind of started a new bunch of work to look at what do people think of the framework, what kinds of projects is it helping or not helping, and what are the kind of pros and cons, and should we have a new framework or should we leave it the way it is? And so one of the organisations that we work very closely to think about a new framework was Essex County Council, who have a partnership. And they were looking at different ways that you could use predictive analytics in the delivery of local services. And they were instrumental in how we thought about updating the framework. They gave us a lot of feedback around how it was the only thing they could find at the time, which helped then construct productive conversations across a range of stakeholders, so heads of services and child protection and the police, and a lot of people who just had no idea about predictive analytics. And those are really the people that you need to get on board if you want to do good things with data in local government and central government. So we did a lot of work both with users of the framework, but also just a lot of engagement with data scientists, both in government and also in industry, then also with lawyers and philosophers, and just kind of anyone who had an interest in this area, and had some really interesting conversations around how you actually kind of codify good practice in data projects. So that kind of led us to rethink the framework, and we kind of moved away from a pure focus on data science, because we really realized that if you want to talk about data sensibly, you need to be able to talk about it holistically. So there are lots of things that go into making decisions on a data project, like information assurance, security, then also obviously the total practical end of, does your algorithm make sense? Is the data of good quality? Can you trust your results? So that led to a new seven principles, which I'll run through. So start with clear user need, obviously very important. Next, be aware of relevant legislation and codes of practice. Number 3, use data which is proportionate to the user need. Understand the limitations of the data, use robust practices and work within your skill set. Make your work transparent and be accountable, and embed data use responsibly. So importantly, the new framework was not just aimed at data scientists. A big part of the engagement showed that this was really off-putting to people. We want any kind of policymaker or anyone in operational specialist be able to pick this up and feel like they can learn something about the things that you should consider when you start out with a data project. So importantly, it was for anyone working directly or indirectly with data in government, or anyone who is interested in starting to do so. So this is the framework on Gov UK. So it has a set of principles, and then each principle has kind of hopefully clear plain English guidance on how to go about thinking about that. So it generally kind of links to key things that we think will help teams in investigating key issues that we've identified further. We've also provided a workbook, so feedback's consistently showing that people love self-assessment. It also really helps when you're working in kind of multidisciplinary teams, because it helps people document how they feel about a project, and it's designed to be dynamic. So if you don't feel like you're quite there on a particular principle at any point, you should be able to work out a way to move forward and go back. So this is just to give an example of some of the questions that we asked for the self-assessment tool. So things like, can you get peers to review your pull requests? So it goes everywhere from kind of thinking about user needs to just quality assurance of your data project. And part of this is also including a data ethics workbook for procurement. So obviously we don't just build software in government, we buy a lot of it. So how do you equip civil servants and public servants to make informed decisions about the software that they're buying? And this is really to give a set of questions for people so they can kind of feel empowered, or at least show them what they don't know. So throughout the whole framework, we really encourage people to make sure they go and speak to experts.
So we've seen what's happened with the most recent iteration of this. Now, the future of the ethics framework is a number of things. First of all, we've seen the ethics framework kind of being adopted and used for other purposes. So this actually is the outline of the new DHSC, Department for Health, Code of Conduct for tech. So again, like the basis of this is effectively the data ethics framework, but they developed it in a way that works for the health sector. We've also seen other things around things like AI guidance and AI toolkits that will be released shortly, which also are kind of grounded in the principles that we've introduced in the data ethics framework. And then finally, just to say, going beyond the data ethics framework in the next iteration, this is the kind of process we're looking to try and follow. So we want to kind of talk to departments, talk to the public sector about how they're using the ethics framework, kind of analyze the gaps, in terms of where this is actually useful and where it's not, and then look to try and refresh the principles, develop more workbooks and more practical guidance that people can actually use in practice, and then obviously iterate further going forward. We do recognise that we need to do a lot more around actually understanding the behavioural effects of this work, and actually understanding the real kind of changes this is going to be making on the ground in terms of the way that data projects are being managed. But we're hoping we can kind of reach out more and kind of gather that information as we look to continue with the further iterations of this going forward.
Thank you very much. Okay. I think that deserves a round of applause. So, any questions? I'm aware there was a slight gender imbalance in the first set, so I'm particularly looking for any questions from women in the audience. Any questions? Hands up. So we've got one there, and one there. Thank you. Just want to pass that along.
Hi, thanks. I'm Julia. I'm a statistician in MHCLG. This feels like something I should know about, and I don't. It doesn't feel like it's come through from the government stats service, so just wondering how you're getting it out there to people.
Hi, I'm Chris Barnes, How's England. Just public sentiment around ethics shifts. Are you doing anything to track that and make sure that we've got ethical or unethical use cases for data that you might be sort of demonstrating to people?
And a bit linked to that, the first question is about use of the framework, and have you got examples of how it's impacted use within departments? The second question is about transparency and algorithms, and what is the GDS position on transparency and algorithms, and what should departments be doing in that space?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So on the first one about kind of you haven't heard of it, yeah, so that's a massive problem.
Yeah.
A lot of people hadn't heard of the first version either, and you will know that the government analytical professions are very complex, and obviously, not to make an excuse, but it's very, very difficult. A lot of the work that we did was to go around and talk to as many data scientists, operational researchers, analysts, And a lot of the reason why we changed the name of it is because you can't, originally it was called data science and focused on data scientists. That immediately put off all of the other analysts and lots of policy people. It really is just sort of a hard slog of trying to get out there. It is fairly well known in the data science community. It's encouraged a lot of work at MOJ. So they do a lot of they're investigating predictive analytics for recidivism. And they're looking at how they use the kind of process that we've gone through to come up with their own. I don't think it's one framework fits all and everyone can just take it up and use it. It's really about striking up a conversation around how do you actually codify this stuff? Like, what does it look like in teams and what do you need to have a sensible conversation? And how do you get an analyst communicating with a non-specialist?
Yeah, absolutely. So just second that, we're trying to kind of reach out as much as we can with this and actually promote it as much as possible. We've seen pockets of activity where people have picked it up and iterated, as I kind of showed in the slides, but we're really keen on continuing that conversation. So if there are department forums, etc., then do let us know, tweet me or whatever, and I'll come and do that. Moving on to the second point there about use cases and ethical use cases. So obviously there is this kind of serious issue around kind of public perception of data use, and obviously we've seen some massive high-profile things that have happened in society in the last kind of, just the last 18 months that have really kind of, I guess, hardened that stance. So we are really keen on trying to kind of do some more communication around like what does good data use look like and what are the benefits for data use. Now, that doesn't necessarily like stop with the data ethics framework. That's something that actually we should be promoting, as a kind of as a sector almost, like in terms of like what the kind of outcomes could be for citizens if we could do, more things in the right way. But actually, as part of this work, as we look to iterate, we'll be going out and trying to find those kind of use cases and trying to champion them and actually publish them in a way that's kind of accessible, if that makes sense.
On that though, I would say the framework in itself is about good practice. So it's not about policing. It doesn't tell you if the thing that you want to do is ethical or not. It says if you want to do a thing and you've gone through the process, good policy making of establishing a user need, going through if you need a business case and all of these kinds of issues and talk to your stakeholders, here is a good process for having a data project. It doesn't tell you can or can't do things. So we really have tried to stay away from, there's not going to be a sort of an ethics police that goes around government. It's really about embedding good scientific method when you use data to make decisions in government.
Absolutely. And then the final question was just around, I think the bit about GDS position. We can't speak for GDS, unfortunately.
So there isn't a GDS position, I would say, on kind of algorithms. This is now a DCMS framework, but it's also the government data ethics framework. It has actually quite extensive guidance in there on transparency of algorithms, and that was written with data scientists. So just to give really honest kind of practical advice on what kind of government data scientists. Yeah, so I think a really good group of data scientists in MOJ were using this quite extensively to think about how they tackled it in their own work. There's also the work that was done in various local authorities, so we can definitely put you in touch with people who've used it.
Next set of questions, and again, anybody in the room next door that wants to ask anything, do come to the door. So we've got one at the back, and we've got one there, and another one there.
Hi, I'm Chris Fairless from the Greater London Authority. Just a question about machine learning, which is of course a hot topic and is also a series of pitfalls for any inexperienced data scientists who especially are working with sensitive data or data that maybe has sort of race, gender components. Have you thought or advised particularly on sort of unintended effects of implementing different processes?
Thank you. And then we've got a couple of questions sort of in the middle there.
Hi, I'm Robert from the Infrastructure and Projects Authority. So we do a lot of work with other governments on enforcing best practice in infrastructure procurement. How does this framework compare to other countries' frameworks? And are we seen as, leading on best practice? That kind of stuff.
Thanks. And just in front.
One particularly impressive aspect of this, how hard was it working with Essex on ethics?
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, I think that was actually a headline, The Only Way is Ethics, and it was just quite nice, so we had worked with Essex. So on the first one, on the machine learning, yeah, so obviously massive part of this, loads of different things to take into account. So there's the technical aspect, so obviously what data science is just knowing how to do machine learning, but actually what we've got guidance in there around kind of, removing statistical traces and this kind of thing, the more technical end. But actually what's really important for those things and unintended consequences is speaking to the people who know about the data, and that's not usually the data scientists, that's the people who run and operate services. So obviously it would have been great to go into much more detail on what's in the framework, but I really encourage you to read it because we kind of hammer home constantly. It's about multidisciplinary teams. You cannot have data scientists kind of squirreling away with machine learning, not having any concept of like where that data comes from.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then what was the next question?
This is infrastructure and
leading.
procurement. Leading. Yeah, so this is the first of its kind, I think, internationally. We did a check, and we're pretty sure that's correct. Yeah, pretty sure. So yeah, we are seen as a leader in this space, actually, and this is something that we're talking to our kind of partners internationally about, what are they actually bringing in other places. Obviously, one of the things that's really important to bear in mind is the legal frameworks that we work within as well here. So obviously, Europe, GDPR, quite similar. There's potentially kind of interoperability there. When you go to other countries that maybe don't have a similar regime, that's a different question potentially. So we need to kind of case by case and work with our partners, but we are seen as a leader in this space internationally, absolutely.
Fantastic.
Is that okay?
3 seconds to go. Very well done. Thank you very much. And next, we'll be hearing from Simon on personal data. Yes, we would like you to have a mic.
Okay.
We will find you a mic.
Must have miscalculated.
Thanks, that was great. Thanks.
Cool. 1, 2, 1, 2. Brilliant. Okay, personal data in government is broken. Crikey. Why do I say that? Well, broadly, it's because citizens, when they interact with government through services, are not particularly happy with the way it works. People expect more direct links than they currently have. It's 2019. My smartphone talks to my credit card. Like, why is government not talking to a different part of government? Why am I having to take information from one part of government and send it to a different part of government? This is frustrating, and it clearly does not meet user needs. Why does it happen? This is what people broadly imagine government as. It's a thing, and there's a database. As most people know, probably in this room, that's not really what government looks like. It's a lot more federated than that. Really, what happens is departments collect data to do their services, and they don't really share it, and that kind of works fine. We decided we didn't want to do the Big Brother database, so that's okay. It works fine until a service comes along and actually says, okay, I need to actually collect something from over here and something from over here in order to make this work. And they can't. There is no link. Generally speaking, there isn't really a way to do it. Obviously, it is done in pockets, but not by default. So really, services that are quite small, they don't really have any other option. They basically have to get the citizen to do the data collection for them. They have to explain to the citizen what proofs they want to see and get the citizen to go and collect them. Why is that hard? Basically because the proofs look like this. They're not designed as proofs. They're letters or just bits of paper. That is a personal independence payment letter, which tells you about your personal independence payment status. It's 7 pages long. The important information is on page 1. This is a DLA letter, disability living allowance. It's 8 pages long. The important piece of information is on page 2. Typically, citizens get this wrong a lot. They either send all the pages, they send only the pages they think are important, or they take a picture using their Nokia 3410 and you can't read it. And really, services feel a lot of pain because of this, because they're constantly having to spend money in caseworker time, going backwards and forwards, trying to collect the right information, or like in the most extreme cases, going into Microsoft Paint and scrubbing out the bits they're not meant to have access to. That's a genuine thing that happens. So Increasingly, the solution that people are turning to is to make this evidence submission easier. So yeah, instead of scanning, or instead of us having to explain how to use a scanner, we're actually just going to get you to take a picture using your iPhone. Okay, fine. But they're doing that rather than going to the source of the data itself and saying, actually, can we just have a direct link here? Why are they doing that? Short answer is, data sharing is really hard. It's not really clear how to do it well or at all. Departments are naturally quite risk averse, and that's for a good reason. It's because they have a responsibility to protect their citizens' data from being misused or leaked. And so that's a good thing, they should do it. But what that means is that if you want to come along and actually get a direct link into any of that data, or maybe not even a direct link, or just take a cut of it, for example, that's really hard to do. And the hard thing is basically it can take years of legal agreements. So you're talking like 18 months to 24 months to set up the legal agreements to do a data share. And if you actually want to do it in a live way with a digital service and have a live link to their data, that's going to cost you £250,000 to do that. Obviously, that's outside of the remit of many smaller services because their volumes can be far less than that over a year. So if we want to make this data more safely available for services to better meet the user needs of citizens, how are we going to do that? Well, firstly, we need to lower the value of data being sent. We don't need to be telling services everything that is known about a citizen. We only need to be telling them things that they need to know. And actually, the only thing they need to know is the citizen eligible for the thing that they're trying to get access to? We also need to lower the effort of legal agreements. So whenever you come along and do a data share, that's 24 months of legal agreements. If you want to do another one, that's another 24 months. You can't reuse any of it, sorry. So we need to be doing better there. We need to raise the standard of the technology. We need to raise the reuse of existing sharing. So if I see there's a data share happening between like 2 departments, and I say, well, actually, can we do something similar? They can say, oh yeah, we're going to start from scratch on that though, obviously. So that'll be another 2 years and another £250,000. This is clearly not going to work. Enter Personal Data Exchange. This was a project run by the Government Digital Service. And really, the idea behind Personal Data Exchange was a trusted federation of people who are going to share personal data, or actually access personal data, because really it's not about sharing big bulk information, it's really about answering very specific questions. So if a service needs to know if you're eligible for, let's say, a disabled parking permit, that's all the information they get to find out about you. Are you eligible, yes or no? So it's a protocol, it's a technology, and it's a federation based on that idea. Similarly to something like G-Cloud, if anyone's familiar with that, or the digital marketplace, where you get onboarded once and then you have access to a broader pool. The same idea here. So instead of doing a bilateral agreement every time with everyone you need data from, you can join a federation, do all that stuff once, and we'll do it well. Also, the technology is really hard to integrate, and cybersecurity is obviously a really serious thing. So we'll get everyone to do that once as well, and we'll make sure that we design it well and we do it well. So they only have to do that really hard integration once, and everyone trusts it. And if we do that, then what we end up with is auditable, compliant, privacy-preserving data access. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail about how that works, but that would be a great topic for a question. So it was a project at the Government Digital Service. I appreciate you can't click on any of these links right this moment, but hopefully we'll share the slides. Come and have a look at the stuff that was done. We built a whole system and a proof of concept, and we showed that it works and it can work. The key message I wanted to give right now is that we need to do something about this now. And the reason we need to do something about this now is because people are starting to do it themselves without any guidance on how to do it well, and they're doing it badly. I've missed a slide. Okay, that's fine. Basically, the example I was going to use was the age verification for pornography websites. This has not been done particularly well. It's been done quite embarrassingly badly. Go and have a look at Alec Muffet on Twitter if you'd like to know exactly why it's incredibly terrible. The short answer is people are not doing it well. We need to do something for everyone now. We need to do the hard work to make it simple. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
some great screenshots about porn verification. That's a shame.
I'm not sure anybody's talked about porn on the Institute for Government stage before. Do we have any questions? There must be lots after that. So we've got one front here, we've got another one at the front. We've got a third questioner. Can I encourage anybody else to ask a third question? Great, well we have 3 at the front.
Richard Sterling from Oxford Insights. I was fascinated about the MVP that you have built. You teed me up for a technical question. I'm going to ask a legal question and an uptake question, so
Okay.
sorry. How simple did you manage to get the legals so that it stops being a 2-year process and hopefully it's nice and short? And also, how many people did you get signed up for the MVP, so actually sharing some data?
Okay, that's excellent questions, thanks.
Tom from DCMS, but not in a DCMS capacity. Wouldn't the hard work to make it simple, or the right hard work to make it simple, just be convincing everyone to have an ID card?
And just at the front here as well.
Hi, Adam from RHE Global. How important are APIs in data sharing? And can you tell us a bit more about the MVP that you built?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, great questions. Thank you very much. So in terms of how simple did we get the legal stuff? So to give a bit of context about this project, basically it was a project at GDS, but it got paused, so it's not being actively worked on anymore, which is kind of why I say we should be doing something, perhaps. The place we got to with the legal was basically modeling in a technical sense the kind of the data sharing agreements built of various things. We didn't do as much work on that as we'd liked. To answer the second part of the question with why, is because we didn't get a huge number of partners engaged because it was still quite it was an alpha project. It was still quite early. So if we wanted to pick this work back up, that would be the next point to be focusing on. Appreciate that that's a bit of a fob-off answer, but broadly that's where we got to with that. Second question, ID cards. Well, if you want to do that, sure. I think when you asked the question, you heard the response in the room. I think like kind of the point is that we decided that we don't want to do that as a society. If we need to change our minds on that, fine, we can do that. But assuming that that's where we are, then this is the sort of thing we need to do. APIs, yes. So I was hoping someone would ask about APIs so I can make a point about the legal thing being more important. So that's great. Thanks both of you for that. Basically, I can't remember exactly the content that made me think this, but yes, you have to do APIs, but in every case, basically, your government is still. Oh no, actually, this is to answer the ID card question. The ID card question, it is very relevant, but I think even unless you bring all the data together as well, you still have the problem of how do you actually access data in people's databases, because really the ID card thing is there for identity, which is just a factor in this system. It's not just about who you are, it's about actually what is known about you. Maybe you could store everything on an ID card, but that presents its own challenges. How important are APIs? Yes, they're really important. One of the things we wanted to get right here was to make sure that APIs, they didn't have to be done the same every single time. No, they did have to be done the same every single time, so that you could basically, as a local authority, you could integrate once and then use the same API over and over again, so you're not having the constant development burden. The MVP is there. I'll tweet about it afterwards as well. It's on GitHub, it's all open source. Go and have a look at it. It's really great.
Great. Next set of questions. So we've got another one there. We've got one at the back. Anyone who's not asked a question before that would like to ask one? And again, any women? We've got one here as well.
So this is a great idea, but the blocker to this kind of thing has always been that there are people in government, your SROs and your SROs, whose job it is to look after the data and stop it getting out. And there's no incentive for them to share data just because some other part of government will find it useful. How do we persuade those people that they want to make their data available?
Thank you. Question back.
Chris Fairless at the GLA, a similar question. A lot of people consider the government untrustworthy or an opponent in some cases. For example, and enabling data sharing is a very political topic. For example, doctors being required to verify immigration status, which this would make very simple potentially. What's the political context that you've thought about here?
Thank you. And finally.
Mateusz Obsomalowski from DIT. Purposely stupid question. Why it's okay for the department to get information about its user from other department as a paper, as a scanned paper, and we don't need data sharing for it, while if you want to automate it, you need a data sharing agreement?
Thank you very much.
Okay, so how do we persuade SROs, basically? That's a difficult question, as you know. Basically, I think a big part of what it boils down to is that, like, kind of this is happening, and like citizens are increasingly putting pressure on departments to do this anyway, and that's not going to go away. That pressure to like digitize and get more linked up, like it is constantly going to be there, and the fact is, like, you're going to have to act and do it. Otherwise, you're going to get embarrassed. As a nation, like, we're not doing very well. There are a lot of other nations who are much further ahead than we are on this sort of stuff. So nationally, it's getting a little bit embarrassing. And at a departmental level, there's a lot of that pressure there to meet citizens' needs is only going to get more, basically. I think that's a big part of the case. Yeah, data sharing is untrustworthy. Yeah, fair enough. One of the big things we wanted to, or we did land in this system, was actually making sure that everything that happened was transparent. So that was done basically in two ways. One is there's actually, as part of the federation, part of the network, there's an independent body which basically controls the entire network, and which says, actually, in order to do any data sharing within this network, you have to convince us that this is a good thing and that you have the right to do it and it's proportionate. And so that's not necessarily a job for something that's completely government. Perhaps it's a role for someone like the Privacy and Consumer Advisory Group, like to be doing that sort of thing. But basically there is like provision for there to be someone independent who says, yes, this kind of data sharing is okay and it's something that we want. Secondly, it's also possible using the auditing technology that we built to basically say, okay, how has my data been used? And do that in a way that only the citizen can get access to, and say, okay, actually, another thing that we found was that some citizens don't want to interact with any departments. So some people were like, oh, I don't want NHS to ever be part of this transaction. So they had the option to say, actually, no, scratch NHS. They're not allowed to see anything. So they do get fine-grained control, possibly. Why are papers okay? That's a really interesting question. I'm not sure. I think broadly the answer is because it's seen as kind of much more in control of the citizen, and through the submission of that paper, it's kind of their consent being given that that's what they want to do with that physical artifact. Whereas when they're not in the conversation, you can't really kind of say that they've consented to it necessarily in quite the same way. There are much better people to answer that question, potentially sitting 1 or 2 rows behind you. So I'd encourage you to turn around and ask that question to them as well, because that's a tough one, to be sure.
Well, the idea could be the data sharing based on consent.
Yeah, it's possible, although I appreciate I'm out of time. However, ICO have said that's not necessarily the right model for government services. Let's talk about it more afterwards, though.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Now, we've had one Data Bytes first already today, which was a live web demo. We have another one coming up shortly, which is a video. It's good you can all come back next time. That's great. So let me introduce to the stage our sponsors for the evening, RHE Global.
Hello, everybody. My name's Martin Pilkington, and this is Hugh Williams, and we're from RHE Global. I'm going to be talking about generating positive social outcomes from citizen reporting using a product that we developed called the Noise app as an example of this. RHE Global, what we do is we sell software products that give solutions to local government and to central government. So we've developed a smarter communications project with the FSA, which is going extremely well, with roughly 400 local authorities involved in that, with food alerts, etc. We've developed a product called REAMS, which is Regulatory Information and Management Services, which is for environmental health officers, and is an expert system. And we've developed apps for local government. And one of those apps that we developed is called the Noise app. And we're going to go through this and explain what that is. But even as far back as 2017, the Guardian newspaper was looking around the world at apps in government and found that our app was one of the top 7 successful apps in the world. We just sponsored, because we create apps for local government, a socketing report on apps in local government, surprisingly. And what that said is that, generally speaking, more and more people can get access to local government services by using apps. And that the socketing report, they looked at 145 local government apps, and they found that some of the apps are multi-service, so you can report or you can interact on various things, and some of the apps were specific apps. Ours, the Noise app, is a specific app. And so what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go into it in a bit more detail and share with you how it works and what it's for. And essentially, it is an example of citizen science. I don't know if you're aware of the concept, I'm sure you are, where you actually take a data point, like a noise, and you record it and you pass it to a scientist who then analyzes it. But this is how it works.
If everyone liked the same sounds, noise wouldn't be a problem. Perhaps it's the neighbour's dog, the late night parties, the early morning construction work, or maybe some other kind of noise. Whatever it is, you have the right to enjoy your home in peace. This is where the Noise app comes in. The Noise app gives everyone a simple way to capture noise nuisance and report it safely and securely to their local subscribing organisation. The Noise app, simplifying noise reporting and investigation.
Almost everybody, I would imagine, in the room has had problems with noise at some point in their life. It is a very, very serious issue. Scientifically, even when you're asleep, your brain responds to noise. So does your heart rate. So it was seen in 2011 in the World Health Organization as a significant issue across the world in terms of health issues and also in terms of antisocial behavior and problems like that. So we have provided a diary tool, a tool, so that we can accelerate noise complaints to environmental officers so that they can actually act on them.
I think what environmental health officers need is evidence. Years gone by, what they used was things like noise sheets. The Noise app now empowers members of the public or people being disturbed by noise to actually gather information and confidently submit it then either to the local authorities going to investigate it or the housing associations who could be dealing with it. What it also does then is enables the noise problem or the noise to be captured in a standard format and in a standard way. If you look at the triangle, what we're trying to do here is collect data, but then hand that data, as Martin said, over to environmental health officers, the scientist people, who can analyse it. They can then decide what action is needed to remedy it and what interventions are required to resolve the problem. So it is about engagement, it is about working with the public, and it's about using new and different and evolving methods of gathering information rather than relying on historic ones which weren't always reliable and successful. Interestingly, you can see the number of local authorities and housing associations that use the app. We've got 200 local authorities. 7,000 people have actually downloaded and registered to use the Noise app. This is the bit I find really fascinating now is, we've ended up with 450,000 plus recordings and submissions to local authorities, a massive amount of data. And that relates to over 45,000 cases where noise is a problem. What we're finding now is, and we work very closely obviously with our local authority and housing association colleagues, is some of that noise, it may not be a barking dog, we're now drilling into it and finding things like domestic violence, physical, emotional abuse. So we're now having to think about, right, what solutions need to be put in place to deal with this. And what we've got then is, through things like community safety partnerships, mechanisms where information can be shared between local authorities, housing associations, the police, and other partners to try and deal with it, to identify the appropriate resolution.
So we collect data, you record on the actual phone information about where you are, where you've heard the noise, and then you actually create a series of data points, 30-second recordings, biopsies of the problem. It could be over a month, it could be over 3 weeks. That's sent to the environmental health officer who opens a case, and then in the end, the case is closed. Either something's done about it, or it may not be a statutory noise nuisance, so there may be not much that can be done about it, but they'll give some advice back on how to handle that. This is an example of the back office analytics that can be done on the website. We have a cloud website where the information is sent from the noise app to actually the website, which is what the environmental health officer looks at. And so they can say, well, last year we had this number of complaints, this number of noise problems in this area, maybe it was construction. Next year we might have more construction happening in our local authority, so maybe we'll talk to the construction firm and say, look, we had too many complaints last year, can you start to look at more ways to mitigate some of these problems?
In terms of pollution, clearly the biggest polluter or issue around pollution is air quality. Noise now is fast following it in terms of how many people are affected by noise problems every year. Again, following on the pyramid, what we're looking at is predicting and preventing. What we've got is all this information about noise problems. We're now able to see where it's happening because of the information that's submitted to the website. The analysis the local authorities can do, we can build that up and start looking at the national dimension. We're having conversations already with the Welsh Government about how you develop a noise and air quality strategy. We're already doing an air quality strategy. Noise is clearly having an impact on communities, so we've got to think about how we can end up with joined up solutions to tackle some of these ongoing problems. In terms of the citizens and the public, the survey was done by Welsh Government last year, which identified that 25% of people had been affected by noise in the previous 12 months. So clearly there's an interest, and a genuine interest. And I think what we're seeing as well is issues around antisocial behaviour. The data we're getting now can inform and influence policy development as we move forward.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So, questions on the noise app and everything around it. So we've got one at the front, we've got another one at the front. Have I got a third question to take it? And one at the back, and then we'll come to you next. So, down here at the front.
A quick one. Are you opening the data sets on noise maps? Like, you've got beautiful data.
Thank you. We've got one here as well, I think.
Thanks. Like many people, I kind of want fire and I want ice and I want them together and I want them now. I want the creative destruction and innovation of private sector developers putting stuff together for us as local authorities, and I want standardisation and simplicity for the citizen. What happens if I download the app and I try and report some noise and my local authority isn't a subscriber?
Thank you. And let's take the next two questions. One right at the back and then one a few. In fact, let's go for Ed first.
Just really thinking back to the data ethics presentation we had earlier, and there's concern around sort of predictive policing. And have you gone through a process, or what are your thoughts about the ethical considerations around collecting this information and how it's used by local authorities?
Thank you. And then the fourth question, right at the back.
Hi, it's Stephen Lorimer from the Greater London Authority. Ed stole most of my questions, so I'm going to ask a slightly different one. Sorry, yeah, we've been working together a bit. We are going to ask the same ones. We talk a lot about how we help our boroughs or local authorities try to define what their needs are, and then coming towards a solution. And the question is, what has your experience been with your clients of them actually knowing what they need. For example, getting their citizens to have empathy for each other and communicate with each other. And are they bypassing going that process by through solutions? And it's just interested to hear your thoughts of that experience as a vendor.
Thank you.
Okay. So noise maps. We can, through this app, get locational data that will give a picture of where noise is occurring in different places within a local authority or a housing association. What we're now looking at is obviously anonymized because can't use the personal data for that, but anonymized, we're looking at talking to, as Hugh has said, certain government bodies about being able to show a picture of where this noise is happening. And what you'll find is that when looking at that kind of analysis, it does help with being able to look in a predictive way and then moving to a preventative way, which is coming back to the purpose of the noise app in the first place, which is what you see here is there's a person and a scientist, and the noise complaints are coming over here, and he's sorting it out. What we'd like is more ideas over here to stop the need for the person in the first place reporting. Number two?
Non-subscribing local authorities. I think the people can download the app. If the local authority is not subscribing, what I'd be encouraging people to do is find out why they're not subscribing. I think the experience we're getting back from the local authorities at the moment is we work obviously closely with local authority colleagues. They're finding it very useful. What we're hoping for is there's going to be some peer pressure and peer support for it, which will show that the way to move forward with these sorts of challenges is to actually have standardized ways of dealing with noise complaints and with the data. It is powerful stuff in terms of being able to find solutions and also to bring other partners to the table. Because quite often if a noise problem will relate, it won't just affect one person, it could affect many people, but also it could be symptomatic of other problems within a community setting. So I think it is about looking at modern and sophisticated ways of taking things forward.
Okay. The third one is about ethical use of the data. In our terms and conditions of use, we lay out very clearly, according to GDPR legislation, that we are only using that data for the purposes of actually trying to solve the noise complaint. And then if we do use anonymized data, it's to do with the fact of the complaint. The thing is that what this product does is that everyone that downloads it to use it is stressed and they're fed up because they've got a neighbor or a dog or something and it's affecting their health. And so they are providing this data, trusting that we are only going to use it for the information, for the purposes that they provided it. And that's exactly what we do. So we use a top law firm in IT called Jurit, and they have an expert on GDPR and data ethics and law, obviously, and we pass everything past them to make sure that everything we do is absolutely in line with the regulations and the legislation.
Just adding a little bit to that as well. The local authorities and housing associations are the ones who will be dealing with the problems. The local authorities will have experience of information exchange with partner organisations, the police in particular. They'll have a core that's in Wales, the Welsh Accord on the sharing of personal information. A lot of local authorities will have signed up to that. They've got community safety partnerships, crime reduction partnerships, all these. So there's mechanisms and ways of sharing information. So that's quite helpful. I think the final question was around citizens' engagement. And I think local authorities, clearly there's a need, they've got mechanisms for talking to their communities. There's mechanisms for feeding information back into the local authority, whether it be through the local councillor, whether it's through different sort of community settings. But I think there is a need, to engage with local authorities, to engage with citizens so we can get accurate feedback on problems that are occurring and finding out whether some of the solutions are working. And I think there is, the noises create, it is causing more problems to communities. But we do need to engage with people to change behaviours, because at the end of the day, we live next to people, we're surrounded by people in blocks of flats, and there is something here about enabling us. Enabling, I don't know if that's even a word even, so apologies. Another Welsh word for it.
Okay,
thank you.
Excellent. We've got time for another quick question, or possibly two. Got one down at the front, and one there as well, and one there as well. Let's go through all three really quickly. We can do this. Yeah.
Hi, so quick question hopefully. Who owns the data? Is it you, is it the local authorities? And who analyzes the data? Is it you or is it local authorities? Because in my experience, the capability for analysis in local authorities is a very varied landscape.
Hi. What's the service that sits around the app? So once the noise gets reported, you say it gets passed on to an enforcement officer, but what happens then? Is the app linked in with the local authority enforcement services?
And final question tonight, just there.
Partly linked to the first question that was asked, what skills and resources are required within a local authority to subscribe to this service, especially about data analytics?
Thank you very much. You can have more than 11 seconds.
You do the first one.
Okay, so we provide a tool that processes the data, and the data is then used by the local authorities under its own data protection and GDPR rules. So they listen to the recordings, we don't. So only the people that are authorised to make a decision on whether that is a statutory noise nuisance or not inside local government or housing associations get to listen to that data. Nobody else does.
The second question probably links to the first in terms of you've got experienced officers who've been dealing with, particularly within the local authority sector, the regulatory services. They've got lots of experiences and for many years have been dealing with noise problems. You know, it's a statutory nuisance and it goes back to the 1875 Public Health Act. I wasn't around when that was written, but I remember it. But we've also got the link then with housing associations through things like antisocial behaviour. There's legal provisions there, and it's a case then of the local authorities, housing associations working collaboratively to actually identify the best way to deal with the problems. What we're seeing as well is local authorities working together on a regional basis to try and develop consistent responses. Because I think in terms of supporting citizens and providing services to citizens, it seems very unfair for it to be a very good service in one part of the country and a less than adequate service elsewhere. So I think that's we're trying to develop the responsibilities with the local authorities and the service providers to come up with the solutions. We're trying to help them by sharing good experience and good practice. Sorry, skills resources it.
Yeah.
I think this is in relation to presumably the expertise within the local authorities. And like I said earlier, local authorities have been doing this sort of work for a very long time. One of the benefits of the app as well is it's giving a very quick and a snapshot view of what the noise is like. Lots of local authorities got very expensive noise monitoring equipment, which costs thousands of pounds. You know, then that's got to be maintained and serviced and all these sorts of things. But we have got very adept and very competent and capable professional officers working in the local authority setting. They're looking for modern solutions, and what we're trying to do then is give them tools that can deliver modern, flexible and agile services to stakeholders and citizens.
I think the last question was about analysis skills.
Yeah,
sorry.
That's what I was going to...
So, as a local authority, do I get this to my noise enforcement officer? Can I then say how many complaints were there in the last 3 months and 3 months before that?
Yep.
And were more of them about live music in, at Banbury, and were more of them about loud?
Yeah, exactly. What this does is it enables much faster analysis and much more thorough analysis because the data's all there. Yeah. Okay, so before it was just manual timesheets, so actually crunching a load of data was a real big problem. This gives you the data, it gives you the analytics within the product itself, Then you can, if you have an API, which we create, you can pull it into back office, you can do analytics on it, but the people who are supposed to see this data are the ones who actually do that work. What we want to do is move it to another level, which is to say we want to cooperate with communities and charities and other bodies to look at the anonymized data and say, right, how can we now look at prediction, and then what are the preventative measures? Because what I want to do and what Hugh wants to do in our company is, as I say, instead of the main flow coming to here, is start to flow back to actually prevent the need for the noise nuisance being reported in the first place.
Thank you very much indeed. Four very different projects tonight, but I think some of the key things that were common across them were about users and actually solving real-world problems. When we think of users, we tend to think of citizens, but we've also seen at least 2 presentations tonight where the citizens are part of the data collection or curation process. And we've also seen the importance of treating civil servants and those making the decisions in government as users and thinking about their experience as well. I'm only going to keep you from the wine for another minute or so. I don't have a timer for that, but a few parish notices before we do depart. Do look out for Devolution at 20, which will be out later later this week. And if you'd like to come to the event, have a look on our website. That will be on Tuesday. Thinking about data bites, the next one will be on the 4th of June. Unlike cabinet discussions about Huawei, we do encourage you to tell everybody. So please do tell your friends, and hopefully see you and lots of them here next time round. If you're interested in presenting or know somebody who should, talk to me. We're also looking for sponsors to support the next event. RHE Global were in the audience last time round, so anybody, please do come and see me afterwards. All that remains for me to say is thank you to our AV team tonight, who've been given every challenge possible, I think. Thank you to RHE Global, again, for supporting tonight's event. Thank you all for coming, and last but certainly not least, thank you to all of our presenters tonight. I've certainly enjoyed myself. I hope you have as well. Thank you.